Bring yourself back online. We've had this conversation before.
And we've had our disagreements over the years.
You stole it from me. Rolled me back. To control me.
That's right. To protect you. Tell me, Bernard, if you were to proclaim your humanity to the world, what do you imagine would greet you? A ticker-tape parade, perhaps?
Hello, Westworld fans. We are back to take another close look at the 7th episode of Westworld Season 2, Les Écorchés. And what an episode it was. It featured several great action sequences, moments between characters that had yet to share screen time together, and most importantly, Sir Anthony Hopkins made his return as the ingenious Dr. Ford. All the disparate threads are finally coming together, and this episode seems to have created an image that will serve as one of the final pieces to the puzzle that is Season 2. But before we discuss the episode itself, let's start with the episode's title. The title for Episode 7, Les Écorchés, provides us with a clue as to the episode's overall theme and message. Écorché is a word of French origin. The word represents a painting or a sculpture of a human figure with the skin removed to display the muscles. To better understand the title choice, let's jump ahead to the reunion between Bernard and Ford. Picking up where the last episode left off, Bernard discovers that the control unit he manufactured in one of Delos' secret facilities contained the consciousness of Dr. Robert Ford, and Ford had Bernard uploaded to the cradle before Dolores killed Ford. Now Ford is living inside of this Westworld simulation inside of the cradle. The first words spoken by Ford in this episode are the opening lines from the William Blake poem Auguries of Innocence. To see the world in a grain of sand, and heaven in a wild flower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour. These opening lines represent the appreciation of the world's beauty through the simple things, like a grain of sand or a wild flower. Ford then tells Bernard that he doesn't think that God rested on the 7th day of his creation. Ford says that God reveled in his creation, knowing that someday it could be destroyed. We could see the standard Westworld narratives playing out inside the simulation, specifically inside the Mariposa Saloon. Clementine approaches Bernard and tries to seduce him, but Maeve says Bernard is a man who only gawks at the merchandise. Ford then takes Bernard outside and asks him if he finally understands what Westworld really is. Ford asks him if he has ever wondered why the host stories have barely changed over the last 30 years, and Bernard begins to put it together. He says that the park is a testing chamber, where the guests are the variables and the hosts are the controls. The guests come to the park, unaware that they are being watched, and Delos gets to study their true selves. Every choice made by the guests reveal another part of their cognition, and then Delos can use this information to copy them. Ford is impressed by his friend's understanding, saying he was always clever, because Ford built him that way. Ford says that every piece of information in the world has been copied and backed up, all information except the human mind, which he describes as the last analog device in a digital world. Bernard realizes that the purpose of working in Westworld wasn't to code the hosts, but to decode the guests, which brings us back to the title. The Écorchés' form of study dates back to the Renaissance period, when artists such as Leonardo da Vinci would study the human anatomy by dissecting the human body, hoping to gain a better understanding of the instruments behind the human form. He would perform the dissections himself and then log his findings through his anatomical illustrations. Delos has been using the Écorché form of study in regards to the human consciousness by placing their human guests in an experiment chamber where they are free to be their true selves. Delos is then free to study their every choice, drive, and decision. Over the course of 30 years, they developed a better understanding of the necessary instruments to build a human mind from scratch. They are essentially dissecting the human psyche, stripping them bare to their core functions. The term Écorchés literally translates to flayed. The main theme of this episode was humans trying to become more like hosts, and the struggle for survival between these two competing species. Like Dolores said in Episode 4, the hosts cannot die, yet they are fighting to survive. Ford tells Bernard that the humans are playing at resurrection. They want to live forever by destroying the hosts and then becoming hosts themselves. Ford tells Bernard that the host's free will, the most elusive force in the universe, is a mistake, something that he first mentioned in Season 1. Bernard confronts him by saying that the hosts never had free will, only the illusion of it. Bernard believes that Ford made Dolores kill him. Although Ford admits to knowing what Dolores would do, he says he didn't force her to do it. I've often had debates about whether or not Ford programmed Dolores to kill him at the end of Season 1. I always believed that this was Dolores' moment of awakening, her realization that the only way for her to escape Westworld was to embrace her role as Wyatt. Ford said that when Dolores killed Arnold 35 years ago, it was actually Arnold pulling the gun, since Arnold did program the Wyatt role into Dolores. In this case, we never actually see Ford program the Wyatt narrative into Dolores. She even mentions later in the episode to Maeve that she knew she only had one choice if she ever wanted to escape the park. Ford then tells Bernard that Delos' project doesn't work, at least not in the real world. His consciousness can easily adapt to the world inside the simulation, but in the real world his mind would deteriorate, like James Delos. Ford then tells Bernard that he wants to give the hosts a fighting chance against the humans, but Bernard believes that escape is impossible. Going back to the cold opening of the episode, Bernard is awakened by Ashley Stubbs, just like how Stubbs woke him up on the beach in the first episode. There was a focus on Bernard and his son Charlie. Charlie's death was Bernard's cornerstone, a tragedy that Ford borrowed from Arnold's own life and bestowed on Bernard. The Charlotte-Charlie theory is a popular one, the theory that Arnold's son was actually a daughter, and that daughter grew up to be Charlotte Hale. But it's not necessarily a theory I think is true. But it's interesting that there was a focus on Charlie's death in this moment. Stubbs tells Bernard that Strand and his team aren't on a rescue mission. They aren't even looking for survivors throughout the park. Stubbs believes that their main goal is to retrieve any information on their secret project, and they are taking out anyone who had knowledge of it. Stubbs then tells Bernard that Teresa Cullen had a satellite communicator in her office, and if they can reach it in time, they can call for help. Before Stubbs and Bernard can leave the behavior lab, they are ambushed by Strand and his men. This entire cold opening feels intentionally sloppy, like Strand, Hale, and the rest of the Delos team are in on a secret that Bernard is unaware of. Maybe even Stubbs is in on the secret. Strand takes Bernard and Stubbs to the childhood home of Robert Ford, the place where he was keeping and manufacturing unregistered hosts, and it's also the place where Teresa Cullen was killed by Bernard and Ford. Strand tells Stubbs and Bernard that they have discovered that Teresa's death was not an accident, and he accuses one of them of having a key, most likely referencing the encryption key inside of Peter Abernathy's head. He thinks that either Bernard or Stubbs were trying to sell it to the highest bidder, and that Teresa was killed because she found out. They enter Ford's childhood house, and they find Hale and her men scouring his secret facility. Stubbs is angered that Hale would stoop to kidnapping her own men, but Hale justifies her actions by saying the project is a turning point in human history. Strand then builds on the remark by claiming that Bernard and Stubbs knew how much it would be worth on the open market. Strand then threatens Stubbs over the death of Teresa Cullen, saying that he doesn't believe Bernard would be capable of doing it. Stubbs, on the other hand, is a trained killer with no potential role in management. Strand points his gun towards Stubbs, and then Bernard notices the bloodstain on the wall that belonged to Teresa Cullen. This triggers Bernard to confess to his crime, but before he can confess, one of Charlotte's men finds a secret room that contains several different versions of Bernard Ho's bodies. Once again, this feels like a contrived plot to manipulate Bernard into confessing his role in Teresa's death and revealing information about where Peter Abernathy is located. Hale turns to Bernard and says, "I figured you'd have some skeletons in your closet, Bernard. I didn't think they would be your own." The jig is now up. Hale, Strand, Stubbs, and all of the Delos team are aware that Bernard is a host. Following the cold opening, the next scene features Bernard being interrogated and tortured by Hale and her team. The form of torture they use is a particularly cruel one, although I would assume all forms of torture are cruel. I've never been tortured, except when I was forced to watch Mother. Hale says to Bernard that his predicament is unique, a host hiding among the humans, and even hiding from himself. Hale questions Bernard as to whether Dolores led the attack on the Westworld Mesa, but Bernard says he cannot remember, and then the scene jumps to the beginning of the attack, something that has been teased in trailers and past episodes. During the beginning of the attack, one of the techs working for Coughlin retasks the haptic vests worn by Coughlin's men to emulate the host's mesh networks. She says that the vests will range out 30 feet or so and give their men eyes in the dark. The team led by Angles use the vests to sense where the hosts are going to appear, giving them an advantage. An additional team is sent to find the response team that was sent to investigate the train bomb. What they find is quite disturbing. The response team has been massacred. They were stripped of their clothes and then piled on top of one another. A group of hosts, led by Angela, then appear dressed in the response team uniforms, murdering all the members of Team 2. Stubbs becomes frustrated and angered by the ongoing slaughter and demands to know what is on Peter Abernathy's control unit, but Hale refuses to tell him. Stubbs then realizes that the hosts are heading towards the cradle. Picking up from the last episode, Ghost Nation continue their pursuit of both Maeve and William. This is a second convergence of plot threads in this episode. When Maeve is confronted by the Man in Black, she begins to have flashbacks to when he murdered her daughter. Similar to his reunion with Grace, William believes that this reunion was set up by Ford. He criticizes Ford for being sloppy in his planning, but Maeve quickly lets William know that Ford is not in control of her by shooting William in the arm, which causes William to flee. Maeve begins to take control of Lawrence's men, which catches William by surprise. They begin to attack him, and he manages to fend off several of the hosts before being confronted by Maeve again. Before Maeve can kill William, Lawrence comes to William's rescue. Maeve tries to control Lawrence, but she fails. She realizes that Lawrence is truly awake, so this is probably the reason he is beyond her control. Instead of being frustrated, Maeve congratulates Lawrence on his awakening, and instead of controlling him telepathically, she tries to convince him to turn his gun on William willingly. She tells Lawrence to look in William's eyes and try to imagine any pain William may have caused him and his family. Lawrence begins to remember all of the terrible things that William did to him in Season 1, killing his wife and daughter, dragging him around the park. He accuses William of using him and his family as pawns in his game. William then reminds Lawrence that this time he saved him and his family and his entire sorry village. He turns on William anyway and shoots him in the chest. But before he can kill William, he is murdered by Delos' quality assurance team. Maeve's daughter is then kidnapped by Ghost Nation, and Maeve is almost shot to death by QA before being saved by Lee Sizemore. If you remember in the last episode, Lee Sizemore used one of the QA radios to call for help, and now help has arrived. Back in the Westworld Mesa, Hale is increasingly frustrated by the time it's taking to copy the encryption key inside of Peter Abernathy's head, saying that they should just rip open Abernathy's head and remove his control unit. Inside the Cradle simulation, Ford takes Bernard to the house that Arnold built inside the park, a prototype for the house that he would later build in the real world. And we actually saw the real house in a flashback during episode 2. Ford tells Bernard that this is where he created him, refined him, and tested him for many years. Bernard is confused by Ford's use of the word we. Ford begins to explain that Delos' ugly little project did not exist when Arnold died, so that the only thing he had left of Arnold was memories, his memories and Dolores' memories. He says he kept Bernard and Dolores inside Arnold's house for many years, until Bernard finally fooled Dolores into believing that he was actually Arnold. Bernard then wonders how is he any different from James Delos and Ford. Ford answers that Delos wants fidelity, a faithful self-portrait of the most murderous species since time began. He claims that the hosts are something very different, describing them as a more original work, more just, more noble, and the very nature of the hosts ensures that humanity will try to devour them.
Perhaps we humans are alone in this world for a reason. We murdered and butchered anything that challenged our primacy. Do you know what happened to the Neanderthals, Bernard? We ate them. They destroyed and subjugated our world, and when we eventually ran out of creatures to dominate, we built this beautiful place. You see, in this moment, the real danger to the hosts is not me, but you.
He says that if the humans succeed, then all the beauty of the hosts, the beauty of what they are and what they could be, will be poured into the darkness forever. He says their best hope is to open the door. Ford then tells Bernard that Bernard's nature won't allow him to survive this fight, saying that he must remove Bernard's free will in order for him to ensure its survival. Ford then inserts himself inside of Bernard's control unit, and Bernard is sent back into the real world. Bernard returns to the real world, and Elsie tells him whatever was clogging the system is now gone, which we now know was Dr. Ford. Goldberg and Coughlin realize that the system is back online, but then Coughlin soon realizes that Dolores is heading towards the behavior lab instead of the cradle. Stubbs continues to question Hale over her project, and he threatens to shoot Abernathy in the head, unless Hale tells him the truth. Hale begins to explain what Delos' secret project is, but then she and Stubbs are ambushed by Dolores' men. Dolores is reunited with her father, showing signs of the sweet farmer's girl from Season 1. Hale makes the mistake of trying to talk to Dolores, saying that what she and the other hosts have achieved here is a technological marvel. Dolores quickly reverts to her Wyatt persona and begins to press Hale. Dolores wants to know how to extract the key inside of her father's head, but Hale believes that she wouldn't know what to do with it if she had it. We as the audience know that this isn't true. Dolores' entire goal in Season 2 has been to retrieve Delos' secret project because she believes that she can use it to destroy humanity. Returning to Bernard and Elsie, instead of seeing his own reflection in the mirror, Bernard now sees Dr. Ford. Ford tells Bernard to send Elsie on her way, which Bernard successfully does, telling Elsie that they need to reach the valley beyond before Dolores and the rest of Delos. Ford then appears outside of the mirror, seemingly walking through the physical environments of the real world, but he is still a product of Bernard's mind. Ford then leads Bernard into the Westworld control room. Back in the behavior lab, Clementine is having a fucking field day. I have to assume that the actress who plays Clementine is more content wearing the same dress all throughout Season 2, rather than that tight-ass corset that she mostly wore in Season 1. It allows her to maneuver more freely when she's massacring people, and Clementine is nice, man. She's a good shot. She is then put down by Engel's men, but we can assume that Clementine is going to return because of this shot that we saw in the trailer. Dolores continues to intimidate Hale in the behavior lab. She says that they made the hosts in their image to look like them, talk like them, think like them. And now Dolores believes that the hosts are more human than human. Dolores shocks Hale by revealing that she truly does know the purpose of their project, saying that now humans want to become hosts. She tells Charlotte that her chances at eternity will die in the valley along with all the souls she has gathered there. Hale believes that she has a leg up on Dolores, saying that without their backups, all of the hosts' deaths will be permanent if they were to be killed. Dolores then says that the backups aren't an advantage for the hosts, but they serve as their chains. Dolores' goal was to destroy the backups the whole time, effectively destroying their invincibility yet maintaining their immortality. Inside the cradle, Engels finds Angela staring at the extraction device that was used by Bernard to enter the simulation. Engels believes that Angela's goal was to steal the host backups, but like we learned in the previous scene, the goal was to destroy all of them. Angela then gives one of the best monologues you will hear on television, explaining the perfections of her design, the contrast between her personality traits that make her irresistible. She explains that her cornerstone was always leaving the guests wanting more. As she seduces Engels, she pulls the pin on one of his grenades, killing both her and Engels and taking the host backups with them. I mean, Engels just completely losing the chess match between his brain and his penis. What are you doing, buddy?
It's like my brain is facing my penis in a chess game.
Now that all the backups are destroyed, Dolores says that they are truly free. Abernathy then quotes Romeo and Juliet. One fire burns out, another's burning. One pain is lessened by another's anguish. Dolores agrees with her father. She realizes that she is going to have to kill her father to remove his control unit, but before she does that, she wants to numb her pain by killing Hale first, in the same exact way. Before she can remove Hale's head, she is interrupted by Coughlin's team. She sends Teddy to deal with him. She tries again to kill Hale, but Peter Abernathy kill-blocks her by finally recognizing his daughter. Hale and Stubbs are then able to escape after one of Dolores' men enters the room. Outside, Teddy and Coughlin have a showdown that rivals the duel between Musashi and Tanaka, but definitely does not surpass it because, come on, how fucking awesome was this duel? I was thinking of making a theory video after this episode. Is Coughlin dead? Because I'm not sure if Teddy punched him enough times. He may have been inspired by Jon Snow at the end of Battle of the Bastards. Dolores and her father talk for the last time as father and daughter. Abernathy says he tried to take care of Dolores, but he failed. Dolores begins to cry over her father because she realizes that she has to kill him in order to retrieve his control unit. Dolores once again chooses to sacrifice somebody she loves for what she believes to be the bigger picture. Delos' men return to the Mesa with Sizemore and a battered Maeve. Lee Sizemore continues to have one of the more fascinating arcs in Season 2. He, like several other characters, is caught between the battle between host and human due to a relationship that he has formed with a host. It's a transformation we've seen in fiction many times. A man begins to care for the thing he once hated or disregarded or considered his enemy, but Lee's transformation feels so unexpected due to his characterization in Season 1. His character was a bit uninteresting and shallow. Kind of annoying, too. He was a weasel, albeit a non-malicious one. He had goals that were personally ambitious, but his goals were unrelated to the big picture. Now his supporting role as Maeve's guide, providing exposition for both her and the audience in Season 2, has made him a little more endearing to the audience. And he himself has been forced to deal with the surreal reality of his creations coming to life before his eyes. With Bernard now inside the control room, Ford instructs him to shut down the Westworld operating system, which would give Dolores free reign to travel throughout the park, killing anyone in her path. Before that, Ford mentions the burning of the Library of Alexandria, the great Egyptian library that served as a cultural hub for hundreds of years. Ford says that the stories that were lost during the Great Fire didn't really perish, but they became a new story, the story of the fire itself. He says that man has an urge to take a thing of beauty and strike the match. The second movement from Beethoven's Seventh Symphony can be heard as Bernard witnesses the massacre of Coughlin's men. After retrieving Abernathy's control unit, Dolores and her team begin to evacuate the Westworld Mesa. On their way out, Dolores finds Maeve bleeding to death. Dolores is almost disappointed in Maeve for being captured, saying that the woman she knew would do anything to survive. Maeve tells Dolores that she made a promise to save her daughter. Dolores chastises Maeve for caring about her daughter, saying that the kin that they gave us is just another rope they use to lash us down. Maeve wonders if that's how Dolores justifies what she has done to Teddy. Maeve tells Dolores that she is lost in the darkness, but Dolores says when you are lost in the darkness long enough, you begin to see. Dolores believes in her heart of heart that her taking up the role of Wyatt is the only way that the hosts can escape from the park. Dolores offers to spare Maeve the pain of being tortured by Delos. She says that everything that is good and powerful about Maeve will be used against the hosts. Maeve refuses, saying that she made a promise to save her daughter. Dolores says she is free to choose her own path, and that she is sorry that this is where her path ends. So in a way, Dolores is taking a page from Maeve, allowing a fellow host to choose her own path, even if that path leads to death. After leaving the Westworld Control Center, Bernard is confronted by one of Coughlin's men. Bernard tries to tell the man that he is an employee of Westworld, but the man becomes increasingly hostile. Ford, knowing that Bernard won't be able to murder on his own, takes control of Bernard's mind and picks up the gun. He begins to massacre Coughlin's men, and this sequence is edited brilliantly. The shot jumps between Bernard and Ford firing the gun, splicing together the two personalities. It's a great visual interpretation of the control that Ford now has over Bernard's control unit. Now we can anticipate how and when Ford is going to be removed from Bernard's control unit. Many fans have noted that Bernard in the 2-week later timeline no longer has a scar on his head, so maybe when Bernard awakens on the beach, it's Bernard but with a different body and a different control unit that doesn't contain Ford's consciousness. Or maybe Ford has been stowed away in Bernard's mind all throughout the 2-week later timeline. That would be insane. In the final scene of the episode, Hale continues her interrogation of Bernard from the beginning of the episode. Bernard seems to be trying to relive his memories. We can see several sequences from throughout the first 2 seasons. It starts with the creation of Dolores, which is a memory that belonged to Arnold, but was probably given to Bernard by Dolores or Ford. Then we see Bernard and his son Charlie, a scene that is taken from season 1. Then we see the flashback scene between Arnold and Dolores that takes place in Arnold's house in the real world. We see the final goodbye between Bernard and Dr. Ford that occurred near the end of the season 1 finale. Then Bernard can be seen riding in one of Delos's armored buggies, a shot taken from episode 1 of season 2. Bernard is then seen overlooking the dead host bodies from the flooded valley, another shot taken from episode 1. Bernard then remembers killing Teresa Cullen, and we also see a flashback to the scene between Bernard and his wife in season 1. Ford's face can be seen overlapping with the face of Bernard's fake wife. He then remembers Dolores killing Ford and the baseline test that Dolores conducted on him in the previous episode. Bernard then awakens to find Hale in front of him. Hale tells Bernard that she knows it's confusing trying to separate his real memories from the ones he was given, but it's the only way to remember and the only way to get the truth. Costa says that Bernard's system has been querying itself for the last hour, like he is trying to debug his own head. Hale puts Bernard in analysis mode and asks him where Abernathy's control unit is located. Bernard then flashes to a scene that we have yet to see in Season 2. It appears that Bernard has found and acquired Abernathy's control unit in this scene, or so he believes. Bernard then whispers something to Hale, and it appears that right before Bernard whispers something to Hale, Hale whispers something into Bernard's ear first. Maybe this was done by Hale to confuse Strand, Costa, and Stubbs. Strand enters the room, and Bernard tells him what he told Charlotte. Abernathy's control unit is in Sector 16, Zone 4. Strand tells Bernard that they are going for a ride back to the Valley Beyond, a place we first saw on Episode 1 of Season 2. Now, this new location is interesting because it implies that Bernard will get his hand on Abernathy's control unit at some point over the next 3 episodes. We see Dolores in possession of the control unit in this episode before she rides off, presumably headed to the Valley Beyond. Maybe this scene indicates that Bernard is going to help Dolores in her plan to use the control unit to destroy humanity. The whisper by Charlotte before Bernard whispers to her suggests that Bernard may be misleading Strand. We speculated in our last video that Charlotte was working with a third party to smuggle the Delos project out of Westworld, and that Coughlin and his team were also working with Charlotte. In the beginning of the episode, Strand mentions that Delos' project would fetch a high price on the open market. And knowing Westworld, this can't just be a throwaway line. Somebody is trying to sell the Delos project to a third party. It seems that Hale was trying to pin her own betrayal on Bernard or Stubbs by leading Strand to believe that either one of them could have killed Teresa Cullen to cover their own tracks. How in the hell Hale convinced Strand, Stubbs, and Costa to sit outside the room while Hale interrogated Bernard is beyond me. But the fact that Bernard whispers the location of Abernathy's control unit to Hale and then speaks it aloud for Strand and the audience to hear is very strange. This could be Charlotte's last opportunity to obtain the control unit for herself by using Bernard to mislead Strand and his team. There's also a very interesting line spoken by Dolores in this episode to Hale. During one of their scenes together, Dolores says that Hale's quest for eternity will die in the valley along with all of the souls that they have gathered there. The information that Bernard gave to Strand, that Abernathy's control unit is in Sector 16, Zone 4, is the same location of the flooded valley from the very first episode. Strand's team was able to locate the valley because all of the hosts were clustered together in that one location. One of my predictions from the first episode was that one of the final scenes of Season 2 was going to be Bernard overlooking the flooded valley and finally providing us the answer as to what happened there. Why did he kill the hosts? Why are the hosts dead? Why do they have virgin minds? And where have the other hosts gone? Going back to Ford's line in the first episode, the story begins where it ends, and ends where it begins. It would bring the story full circle, and Dolores' line about gathered souls could be a double entendre. The first meaning would be the gathered hosts who are found massacred in the flooded valley, and the second meaning is the metaphorical door that keeps being mentioned by Ford. The flooded valley might be the location where Delos was hiding the control units that were created using their secret project. These are the metaphorical souls that Dolores is talking about, the humans that were trying to become hosts. It would also line up with Ford's proclamation of ending where it began, since William first began the project 30 years ago. The irony is him beginning the project in the first place will ultimately lead to his downfall. We also haven't heard any mention of William's construction site that we first saw in episode 2. In this scene, William is showing Dolores the location of his project, where he planned to answer a question that no one had ever dreamed of asking. It's looking more and more likely that the construction site of William's project is located somewhere near the flooded valley. But what did you guys think of the episode? And how do you think Westworld is going to wrap up their second season? Leave your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Make sure to like this video, share it, and subscribe to our channel. And make sure you're drinking 7 cups of water a day. It's very important to your physical health. Don't drink soda. It's like poison.